In a city where tradition meets modernity, one woman dared to defy her culture for love. But when secrets are exposed, the consequences were deadly. Noor Al-Sayegh, a 38-year-old receptionist at the Al-Madina Medical Clinic in Karama, returned to her apartment in Al-Nada at precisely 6:37 p.m. The three-tower residential complex, built in 2008, housed primarily middle-class expatriate families and a small number of local Emiratis like the Al-Sayeghs. Their two-bedroom unit on the 9th floor of Tower B offered a partial view of Dubai Creek, though the newer developments increasingly obscured what had once been their apartment's selling point. The February evening brought a rare coolness to Dubai, with temperatures dropping to 19 degrees Celsius as the sun set behind the urban sprawl. The apartment showed signs of hasty morning departures, breakfast dishes in the sink, her daughter's school scarf draped over a dining chair, her son's textbooks spread across the coffee table. The furniture, mostly purchased during Danube Home's 2014 Ramadan sale, had begun showing wear in the high-traffic areas. Noor placed her handbag on the kitchen counter and checked her Samsung Galaxy S5, a hand-me-down from Faisal who had recently upgraded to the S7. No messages from her husband, no indication of when he might return home. Faisal Al-Sayegh, 47, had risen through the ranks at Electromart over 15 years, now managing a team of 6 salespeople at their Sheikh Zayed Road branch. His monthly salary of 18,500 AED allowed the family modest comfort but little luxury in a city built on extravagance. His Nissan Altima, purchased used 3 years ago, needed maintenance that Noor had reminded him about twice this week. Like many of her practical concerns, this too had been met with distracted acknowledgement and subsequent inaction. Their relationship had begun with genuine affection, a semi-arranged match between families with close ties. Their wedding in 1998 had been modest by Emirati standards but filled with optimism. The photographs, displayed in a silver-plated frame on their TV console, showed younger versions of themselves, Noor's face framed by a more traditional Shayla, Faisal's clean-shaven jawline now replaced by the short beard he had grown in 2010. 18 years and 2 children later, the emotional distance between them stretched far wider than the physical proximity their small apartment forced upon them. Noor opened the refrigerator, surveying its contents to prepare dinner. Her son Khalid, in his final year at Al-Alia school, would return from football practice by 7:30. Her daughter Layla, 2 years younger and increasingly withdrawn, would emerge from her bedroom only when called for dinner. The family rarely ate together anymore, with Faisal claiming work commitments kept him at the office well into evening hours. The family WhatsApp group, created 3 years ago to coordinate schedules, now served primarily as Noor's one-way communication channel, her messages often met with silence or terse replies. The first concrete evidence of Faisal's infidelity had appeared 11 months ago, a hotel receipt from the Arabian Courtyard Hotel and Spa tucked in his pants pocket while doing laundry. The modest hotel in Bur Dubai was neither close to his workplace nor anywhere Faisal had mentioned visiting. The same hotel appeared on their joint credit card statement twice more in subsequent months. Noor had said nothing, cultural conditioning and practical considerations overwhelming her initial surge of confrontational anger. More evidence accumulated with quiet persistence. Unfamiliar perfume lingered on his shirts, distinctly not the low-cost Parfum that Noor had worn since 2011. Late-night phone calls taken in whispered tones on the apartment balcony. Text messages glimpsed before screens were hastily turned away. A pattern emerged of overnight sales conferences that appeared on no official company calendars. By mid-2015, Noor had stopped questioning the inconsistencies, her silence purchased with new kitchen appliances and occasional family meals at Automatic Restaurant in Al Righa. The cultural barriers to divorce loomed insurmountable in her mind. Though the UAE had modernized many aspects of its legal system, the social repercussions for an Emirati woman initiating divorce remained severe. Her own mother, now 64, had emphasized patience during their weekly phone calls. Marriage is endurance, she would say, a philosophy that had sustained her through 45 years with Noor's increasingly traditional father. Noor's younger sister Latifa, married to a bank executive and living in a villa in Jumeirah, suggested separate bedrooms as her own solution to marital dissatisfaction. Noor's journal, kept in the bedside drawer beneath her prayer rug, documented her increasing isolation. "I exist as a function, not as a person," she had written on December 14, 2015. I am the receptionist, the cook, the mother, the acceptable face of Faisal's devotion to family values. In private, I disappear more each day. Another entry from January 3, 2016, read, Khalid looked at me with surprise when I laughed at the television program tonight. He said it had been so long since he'd heard me laugh that he'd forgotten the sound. Have I become a ghost already? Her position at Al Madina Medical Clinic, secured through a family connection in 2012 after the children entered secondary school, provided Noor with crucial social interaction. As the front desk receptionist, she managed appointments for the 4 doctors, handled insurance paperwork, and welcomed patients. Her supervisor, Dr. Patel, had commented favorably on her efficiency and calm demeanor, unaware that the workplace represented her only escape from domestic silence. The 4,800 AED monthly salary went primarily toward Layla's additional English tutoring and household expenses that Faisal increasingly forgot to cover. The apartment carried subtle indicators of emotional neglect that matched Noor's psychological state. Family photographs stopped updating in 2013. The living room wall displayed Khalid's academic achievement certificate from 2014, but nothing more recent. Holiday decorations for Eid remained in the same configuration for 3 consecutive years. The master bed had become functionally Noor's alone, with Faisal's late returns and early departures serving as justification for his preference for the sofa. The physical erosion of their marriage had progressed so gradually that Noor struggled to identify when exactly her husband had become a stranger sharing living space rather than a partner sharing life. Michael Bennett stood before his class of intermediate English students at the Global Horizons Language Institute in Al Nada, his Midwestern accent distinctly American among the multinational faculty. At 25, his sandy brown hair and persistent sunburn marked him as a recent arrival to Dubai, having accepted the teaching position just 4 months earlier after completing his TEFL certification in Chicago. The Language Center, housed in a converted retail space on the ground floor of a residential building, served the surrounding middle-class neighborhoods with affordable English classes focused on test preparation and business communication. His studio apartment in International Cities England cluster reflected both his teacher's salary and academic inclinations. The 400-square-foot space contained a carefully organized collection of paperbacks that occupied an entire wall. Most had been shipped at considerable expense from his parents' home in Rochester, Minnesota. Classics of American literature alongside contemporary fiction and poetry collections from small presses. His furniture consisted primarily of IKEA basics, assembled by hand during his first week in Dubai, and a collection of cushions for floor seating purchased from Dragon Mart. The balcony, barely large enough for a folding chair, offered a view of neighboring buildings and distant construction cranes. Michael's path to Dubai had been shaped by restlessness and economic necessity. His English literature degree from the University of Minnesota had yielded few job prospects beyond retail work, while teaching positions in American schools required credentials he couldn't afford to pursue. The Global Horizons position had promised adventure and practical experience, with a salary sufficient to begin repaying his student loans. His parents, his father a postal worker, his mother an elementary school librarian, had expressed concern about the Middle East placement, their knowledge of the region limited to news headlines and travel warnings. The initial meeting with Noor Al-Sayegh occurred during parent-teacher conferences in late February. Michael had been reviewing Layla Al-Sayegh's progress in the Advanced IELTS preparation course. The 15-year-old showed natural aptitude but inconsistent effort, her recent assignments reflecting diminishing engagement. When Noor arrived for the scheduled consultation, Michael immediately noticed her composed demeanor, professional, polite, but carrying an undercurrent of resignation that seemed at odds with her carefully maintained appearance. Unlike other parents who focused exclusively on scores and university prospects, Noor asked about Layla's participation and whether she seemed happy in class. The question reflected a deeper concern that resonated with Michael's own educational philosophy. Their conversation extended beyond the allocated 15 minutes, with other parents waiting outside. Michael suggested continuing their discussion the following week while reviewing Layla's practice essay. Noor agreed with a grateful smile that momentarily transformed her face, revealing a glimpse of warmth beneath the practiced composure. Their subsequent meeting at the Tim Hortons adjacent to the Language Center established a pattern. Educational concerns gave way to broader conversations, Michael's impressions of Dubai as a newcomer, Noor's memories of the city before its explosive growth, shared observations about cultural differences and similarities. Michael found himself describing his hometown, his family's modest traditions, his ambitions to eventually write seriously. Noor listened with genuine interest, asking questions that demonstrated actual attention rather than polite formality. During their third coffee meeting, Michael noticed Noor checking her watch repeatedly, anxiety crossing her features. When he asked if she needed to leave, she explained the precise accounting of her time required to maintain her household responsibilities without raising questions. The careful scheduling of her life, down to minutes allocated for each necessary task, revealed the constrained nature of her existence. Michael mentioned that the Al-Mamzar Beach Park stayed open until 10 p.m. on weekdays, offering a potential space for longer conversations. Noor hesitated, then wrote down her personal mobile number, the first deliberate step beyond propriety. Their first meeting outside the context of Layla's education occurred on a Thursday evening in March at Al-Mamzar. The public park, with its walking paths and beach areas, offered both visibility for propriety and sufficient space for private conversation. Seated on a bench overlooking the Persian Gulf, Michael shared Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken from a dog-eared poetry anthology he carried in his messenger bag. Noor listened intently, the poem's themes of choices and alternate lives visibly affecting her. "I studied English literature for 2 semesters before my marriage," she revealed. "I still remember Wordsworth's Daffodils by heart." As spring progressed, their meetings developed a careful rhythm, twice weekly at locations chosen for both convenience and discretion. The Old Cafe in Al-Bustaikia Quarter where tourists seldom ventured. The quiet upper floor of Book World in Deira city centre during weekday mornings. The far corner of Zabil Park on late Tuesday afternoons when Noor's clinic shift ended early. In these spaces, they exchanged stories, perspectives, and eventually confessions. Michael described his brief engagement to his college girlfriend, ended when career paths diverged. Noor gradually revealed the details of her marriage's slow dissolution, each revelation offered tentatively as if testing whether judgment would follow. Their emotional connection deepened through small gestures. Michael bringing specific books he thought would resonate with her, Mary Oliver's poetry, short stories by Jhumpa Lahiri. Noor arriving with containers of homemade Emirati dishes, makbous with chicken, ligamat dumplings with date syrup, foods from her heritage prepared with increasing care. When Michael praised her hairs, mentioning he had never tasted anything similar, Noor's eyes brightened with a pride rarely permitted expression. "My grandmother taught me this recipe," she explained. She said food carries memory across time. By late April, their relationship existed in an unspoken emotional territory, beyond friendship but contained within strict physical boundaries. They had not touched beyond accidental contact when passing books or food containers. Yet in glances held too long, in conversations that explored increasingly intimate thoughts, in the gravitational pull that seemed to decrease the space between them during each meeting, something profound was developing. Neither named it directly, but its presence shaped every interaction, creating a parallel reality where they existed without the constraints of cultural difference, age gap, and marital status. "You're the first person who's truly seen me in years," Noor confessed during a quiet moment at their Bustaikia cafe, the late afternoon light filtering through carved wooden shutters. "Not as someone's mother or wife or employee. Just me." Michael reached toward her hand resting on the table but stopped short of contact, honoring the invisible boundary. "I see you," he replied simply. "And you're worth seeing." The first visit to Michael's apartment in International City occurred in early May, precipitated by an unexpected rainstorm that interrupted their meeting at Mamzar Beach. The justification seemed innocent enough, drying off, waiting out the weather, but both recognized the threshold being crossed. Michael's studio, with its wall of books and minimal furnishings, became their sanctuary over subsequent weeks. Noor had constructed an elaborate alibi system, women's health support groups, extended shifts at the clinic, shopping excursions with her sister, all carefully documented with supporting evidence. She kept duplicate shopping bags from specific stores, collected receipts from places she hadn't visited, and maintained detailed notes of fictional conversations with people who existed but whom she hadn't actually seen. Seated on floor cushions arranged near the room's only window, they would talk for hours, their conversations ranging from childhood memories to philosophical questions about purpose and meaning. Michael described the Minnesota winters, the frozen lakes and snow-laden pines, painting verbal pictures of a world Noor had only seen in films. She spoke of pre-boom Dubai, the quiet fishing villages and pearl divers that had defined her grandparents' generation, a heritage increasingly overshadowed by skyscrapers and luxury developments. In America, marriage is primarily about personal fulfillment, Michael explained during one of their cultural exchanges. If that fulfillment ends, the relationship is considered finished too. Noor contemplated this perspective, comparing it to her own understanding. For us, marriage is a permanent social structure, not a feeling. Personal happiness has always been secondary to family stability. She traced patterns on the cushion's fabric, not meeting his eyes. I never questioned this until recently. Now I wonder what my life would have been if personal joy had been permitted as a priority. By June, Michael's teaching contract was approaching its final 3 months. The natural conclusion of his time in Dubai forced conversations about the future that might otherwise have remained safely theoretical. In his small kitchenette, preparing pasta with ingredients purchased from the nearby Zoom market, Michael first suggested the possibility of Noor accompanying him back to Minnesota. The proposal came hesitantly, acknowledging its radical nature. I have family there, connections. We could start something real, something based on actual feeling. The suggestion hung between them, simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. Noor had been quietly building a financial escape fund for months, volunteering for additional shifts at the clinic and selling pieces of jewelry gifted by Faisal during their early marriage. Her secret account at RAK Bank, opened using her clinic employment documentation, contained 47,300 AED, approximately $12,870. Not enough for a new life, but sufficient for transition expenses. That night, sitting cross-legged on Michael's bed, she confessed this preparation without explaining its original purpose. I've been saving to leave, without knowing where I would go. Their research became methodical and increasingly urgent. Michael's laptop browser history filled with immigration websites, visa requirements, employment opportunities in Minneapolis. Noor created a password-protected note on her iPad titled Medical Conference Documents that actually contained timeline options, financial calculations, and lists of necessary documents. The complexity of her situation became increasingly apparent. An Emirati woman leaving with an American man would face significant legal hurdles, even before considering cultural consequences. What about Khalid and Layla? Michael asked one evening in late June, the question they had been circling for weeks. At 17 and 15, the children represented Noor's deepest attachment to her current life. Khalid begins university next year, she replied, her voice steady despite the pain evident in her eyes. Layla could join us after she finishes school. 2 years. I could endure anything knowing there was an endpoint, a reunion. The plan gradually solidified around Michael's contract end date in September. He would return to Minnesota as scheduled, establish necessary housing and employment, then file documentation for Noor's visa. She would remain in Dubai for approximately 2 months, finalizing her financial arrangements before joining him in late November. The logistics were daunting but navigable with careful preparation. As their departure date approached, a recklessness crept into their previously cautious behavior. They ventured to Marina Walk one evening, momentarily holding hands in the relative anonymity of the tourist area. Michael purchased a delicate silver bracelet with a small compass charm from a street vendor in Karama, placing it on Noor's wrist in the shadow of a stairwell. So you can always find your way to me, he whispered, the sentiment simultaneously romantic and practical. Noor, in turn, gave him her grandfather's Tasbih prayer beads, the wooden pieces smooth from decades of faithful use. To connect you to my history, even as we create a new future. Most dangerous of all, they took photographs together. Nothing explicitly romantic, 2 friends sitting at cafe tables, standing beside Dubai Creek, browsing books at Kinokuniya, but evidence of connection nonetheless. Michael's roommate, David, another American teacher at a different institute, noticed the frequency of Noor's visits and the intensity of their interactions. "She's married, right?" he asked one morning while Michael prepared for class. "You know how seriously they take that here. This isn't just about losing your job anymore." Michael dismissed the concerns with the certainty of the deeply in love. "What we have is real," he insisted, his Midwestern idealism reinforced by emotional investment. "People deserve happiness. Systems that prevent that are wrong, regardless of culture." His conviction had taken on an almost religious quality, his belief in their future together becoming the organizing principle of his existence. By early September, tickets had been researched, Michael's confirmed return flight to Minneapolis on September 30th, and a tentative booking for Noor on Emirates flight EK215 departing November 25th. Their last night together before implementation of their plan would be September 28th, after which Michael would move to a hotel for his final days in Dubai, avoiding any connection between them during the potentially risky departure process. The oversight occurred on September 23rd, 5 days before Michael and Noor's planned final meeting. The family dinner, a rare occasion with Faisal actually present, had progressed with the usual strained conversation focused primarily on Khalid's university applications. Noor had been reviewing her notes app earlier that afternoon, making final adjustments to the November departure timeline. In her haste to prepare dinner, she had left her iPad on the kitchen counter without activating the lock screen, the battery charging from the wall outlet beside the refrigerator. Khalid, entering the kitchen for water, noticed the device's screen illuminated with unfamiliar content. The heading Minnesota arrival plans caught his attention, followed by bullet points detailing flight information, address details for a place called Rochester, and financial calculations. His initial confusion quickly transformed to understanding as he scrolled through the document, finding references to visa applications and a section titled Explanation Letter for Layla, after departure. The betrayal he felt was immediate and overwhelming. The mother he had respected despite her traditional role was planning to abandon their family. The confrontation began quietly, with Khalid holding the iPad in the kitchen doorway while Noor washed dishes. "What is this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The shock on Noor's face confirmed his suspicions before she could formulate a response. Her desperate attempt to explain, speaking of happiness, of years of emotional neglect, of the possibility of bringing Layla to America after graduation, only intensified his sense of betrayal. When she mentioned Michael, describing him as someone who truly valued her, Khalid's expression hardened completely. Without another word, he walked into the living room where Faisal sat watching television. "Baba, you need to see this," he said, handing over the iPad with the incriminating notes displayed. Faisal's reaction revealed nothing as he scrolled methodically through the documents, his face a mask of controlled emotion. When he finally looked up at Noor, who stood trembling in the doorway, he merely nodded once before returning to his television program. "We will discuss this tomorrow," he said, his tone conversational, as if addressing a minor household concern. That night, Faisal moved through the apartment with eerie calmness. He prepared for bed at his usual time, maintaining normal routines while Noor lay sleepless, anticipating the confrontation that oddly never materialized. Around 2 a.m., with Noor finally succumbing to exhausted slumber, Faisal carefully retrieved her phone from the bedside table. Using her finger against the scanner while she slept, he unlocked the device and accessed her WhatsApp conversations. The exchange with Michael B. revealed months of messages, arrangements for meetings, literary quotes, expressions of emotional intimacy, and recently, coded references to their departure plans. Faisal composed a new message, studying Noor's previous texts to match her communication style. "Need to see you tonight. Family asleep. Can we finalize plans? Something's happened." He added details about the potential compromise of their timeline, creating urgency that demanded immediate attention. Michael's response came within minutes despite the late hour. "On my way. 30 minutes. Wait for me downstairs in the parking area? Less risky than coming up." Faisal confirmed the arrangement, directing Michael to the building's rear entrance where service vehicles made deliveries during daytime hours. He then woke his brother-in-law, Omar, with a brief phone call that contained only essential information about the American teacher who had planned to take his wife to Minnesota. The Al-Nada building's security cameras captured Michael's arrival at precisely 11:37 p.m. His Toyota Yaris, purchased used from a departing teacher 3 months earlier, entered the visitor parking area with headlights dimmed. The footage showed him checking his appearance in the rearview mirror, adjusting his shirt collar and running fingers through his hair before exiting the vehicle. He carried nothing except his phone, his expression a mixture of concern and anticipation as he approached the service entrance as instructed. The security guard stationed in the lobby, focused on a cricket match streaming on his phone, failed to notice the 3 figures converging in the underground parking level. Faisal and Omar had positioned themselves behind a concrete pillar near the service elevator. Faisal holding the tire iron from his Nissan's trunk, Omar gripping a length of rope normally kept in his fishing tackle box. When Michael entered the poorly lit area, scanning for Noor, Faisal emerged first. Recognition and confusion crossed Michael's face simultaneously. "You're Faisal," he stated rather than asked, backing toward the exit instinctively. "Where's Noor? Is she okay?" His concern for her safety, even in the face of obvious danger to himself, reflected priorities shaped by genuine emotion. Faisal advanced without speaking, the tire iron half concealed against his leg. The first blow caught Michael across the shoulder as he turned to run, sending him sprawling onto the concrete floor. His phone skidded away, the screen illuminating briefly with an outgoing message to Noor that would never deliver. "Something wrong." Your husp. Omar moved quickly to retrieve the device while Faisal continued the assault with methodical precision, targeting joints and ribs rather than the head, prolonging consciousness and pain rather than granting the mercy of immediate unconsciousness. A maintenance worker on the far side of the parking facility heard sounds of the struggle but chose not to investigate, later telling police he assumed it was just young men fighting over nonsense. When Michael's breathing became labored from what would later be identified as a punctured lung, Faisal finally targeted the American's head with multiple blows, ending the assault only when Omar confirmed no pulse could be detected. They wrapped Michael's body in a plastic top from Omar's construction business, loading it into the trunk of Michael's own Yaris. Faisal drove the vehicle while Omar followed in his work van, their 2-car convoy leaving Al-Nada at 1:23 a.m. according to security footage later reviewed by investigators. Their destination was a remote area near the Al-Qudra Desert Road, where construction waste was frequently dumped illegally. The body, still wrapped in the tarp secured with packing tape, was left in a shallow depression behind a mound of discarded building materials, the location selected for its infrequent human traffic and scavenging wildlife. The Yaris was abandoned at Al-Quaz industrial area, wiped of fingerprints and left unlocked with the keys in the ignition, virtually guaranteeing its theft by morning. By 3:45 a.m., Faisal had returned home, showered, and returned to bed beside his still sleeping wife, his breathing calm and measured as he mentally prepared for the morning's confrontation. Noor woke on September 24 to an apartment filled with unusual silence. Faisal, normally departed by 7 a.m., sat at the kitchen table drinking coffee and reading news on his tablet. Checking her phone, she found a notification for a missed call from Michael at 11:40 the previous night and a partial text message that ended abruptly. When she attempted to call him, the phone rang unanswered, eventually going to voicemail. Her third attempt was interrupted by Faisal, who entered the bedroom doorway with a calm that seemed more threatening than any rage might have been. "Your American problem is solved," he stated flatly, watching her face as comprehension dawned. "He won't be taking any Emirates flights in November." The precise reference to details from her private planning documents confirmed that not only had her escape been discovered, but something terrible had happened to Michael. Faisal described the previous night's events with clinical detachment, emphasizing the location where they had left the body and mentioning that Michael had called out for her even as the final blows were delivered. Noor's horror manifested physically, violent trembling, shallow breathing, a cold sweat breaking across her skin. Her phone slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers as Faisal continued, explaining that she would maintain normal routines while he decided on appropriate family consequences. "The children will never know their mother planned to abandon them," he concluded. "Your shame remains private, as does my response to it." His control, his absolute certainty in the righteousness of his actions, reflected a worldview where honor justifies any measure. With Faisal's departure for work, Noor's shocked paralysis gave way to desperate action. She called her sister Latifa, requesting emergency help with a family health situation, using their pre-established code for serious trouble. Within an hour, Latifa arrived to collect Layla for what was explained to the confused teenager as a special shopping excursion. Khalid, still angry from his discovery of her planned departure, refused to leave the apartment despite Noor's pleas. Her final communications were methodical. A message to her mother contained veiled references to childhood memories and gratitude for lessons taught. To Latifa, she sent more explicit instructions: keep Layla with you tonight. Tell her I love her more than my own life. Her clinic supervisor received a brief resignation email citing family circumstances. For Faisal, she left a handwritten note on the kitchen counter: you solved one problem but created another. I go to be with him. The drive to Al Qudra in her 2010 Toyota Camry took 47 minutes, the navigation app guiding her to the general area Faisal had described. The construction waste dump sprawled across several acres of desert, piles of broken concrete and discarded materials creating an alien landscape in the afternoon heat. Noor moved methodically between mounds of debris, her black abaya gathering dust as she searched for evidence of disturbance. She found Michael's body shortly after 3 p.m., partially uncovered by scavenging animals despite the taupe wrapping. The sight, his face still recognizable despite the trauma, one hand extended as if reaching, broke something fundamental within her. From her handbag, she retrieved the collection of medications accumulated over the previous week: her own sleeping tablets, her mother's heart medication, and prescription painkillers obtained from a sympathetic pharmacy technician at her clinic. Seated beside Michael's body, she swallowed the pills methodically with water from a plastic bottle, then lay down on the sand beside him, one hand extended to touch his. The bodies were discovered at 7:15 a.m. the following day by a group of cycling enthusiasts using the nearby Al Qudra cycle track, their morning training route taking them past the illegal dumping ground. The cyclists, primarily European expatriates from Dubai's financial sector, immediately contacted police and remained at the scene, their expensive carbon fiber bicycles incongruous against the stark backdrop of death and discarded construction materials. The Dubai police forensic team arrived within 30 minutes, establishing a perimeter that would eventually expand to encompass both bodies and Noor's vehicle. Initial evidence collection proceeded with professional efficiency until the female victim's identity was confirmed through vehicle registration and identification in her handbag. The senior investigator, Lieutenant Colonel Karfan, immediately recognized the surname Al-Sayegh and its connections to mid-level government officials, prompting calls to superiors and a subsequent change in investigation protocols. American diplomatic officials became involved the following morning, when Global Horizons Language Institute reported Michael Bennett missing after failing to appear for scheduled classes. The discovery that the male victim held a U.S. passport complicated the case's quick resolution. The American consul general personally contacted Dubai Police Headquarters, requesting thorough investigation and transparency regarding the death of an American citizen. Dubai's English-language media reported the incident with careful neutrality. 2 bodies discovered in desert area, investigation ongoing. Arabic newspapers maintained complete silence on the matter. International outlets, however, particularly American networks, framed the story differently. American teacher found dead alongside UAE national woman, possible honor killing suspected. Michael's parents arrived from Minnesota 3 days later, their grief complicated by bureaucratic obstacles. Their son's body remained in the police morgue while investigations continued, the release delayed by seemingly endless documentation requirements. They established temporary residence at a modest hotel in Deira, making daily visits to the American consulate and police headquarters, their Middle American directness increasingly giving way to bewildered resignation as they encountered institutional resistance to their questions. Between cultures and across continents, 2 families remained forever altered by desires that transcended cultural boundaries but could not overcome them, universal human emotions constrained by particular social realities, with tragic consequences that echo through lives on both sides of the divide.